Hi my dear students, welcome back to the second part of this video lesson on Horegallu by Sudha Murthy. Hope you remember what we discussed in the first part of this video lesson. We discussed how a patient listener is somewhat similar to a Horegallu. See the Horegallu on the screen. A patient listener is exactly like this Horegallu. That's what the author Sudha Murthy says. She compares a patient listener to a Horegallu. What purpose did this Horegallu serve in a traditional Indian village? The Horegallus were very useful in olden days. The tired travelers in villages would put down their heavy burden on this Horegallu and take some rest and catch their breath and then go ahead with the journey carrying that burden. And Sudha Murthy says a patient listener also does the same thing. A patient listener offers other people a chance to put down their heavy burden, that mental burden, emotional burden, so that they could feel relieved and go ahead with more energy to face adversities in life. So that is how Sudha Murthy makes a comparison between these two. She brings out a parallel between these two. Now look at this image here on the screen. What do you see on the screen? So this is an exact representation of the modern man, how hard he struggles to move ahead with all the burden in his head. And read the caption. What does the caption say? The caption says, the heaviest burdens that man carries are the thoughts in his head, not on his head, the thoughts in his head. And he is weighed down by that weight, the weight of that emotional burden. And see how hard he struggles. He can't move ahead because his head is weighed down by those problems, those thoughts, negative thoughts. So we'll go on to another image. Now see this image. A cartoon. What does this cartoon suggest? What does it convey? It also conveys almost a similar idea. It conveys that the modern man, is weighed down by all sorts of problems. He carries a lot of emotional burden. What are the burdens he carries? First of all, grief, sorrows. Secondly, inferiority complex. He suffers from inferiority complex. And then there is fear. Mostly fear of failure, fear of enemies, fear of death. Then there is the guilt. The feeling of being guilty. These are all many more are there. These are all the main problems that the modern man suffers from. And when he gets a chance to put down that burden, by confiding with somebody, by just sharing his thoughts with somebody, sharing those problems with somebody, he would get so much of relief. And he could go ahead to face the problems in his life. So this is the service that a patient listener renders to the people who suffer from such emotional problems. So in that way, a patient listener is doing a tremendous social service, as the author Sudha Murthy says. A patient listener is doing a tremendous social service. Now you could see these two pictures on the screen. The Horegallu as well as a patient listener. And see how the author Sudha Murthy compares these two. The Horegallu, which relieves the physical load, and a patient listener who relieves the emotional load of the people around. So this is what we read in this story, Horegallu by Sudha Murthy. How patient listeners are playing such an important role in the society by giving relief to the people from their emotional burdens. So, dear children, we have read the first three paragraphs of this story. In the first three paragraphs, we have read how summer days remind Sudha Murthy of her childhood in a little village. And what she remembers in that village, she remembers that large banyan tree. In right in the middle of that village, and under that banyan tree, there was a Horegallu, and people who were carrying a heavy burden would come there, put their burden on the Horegallu, take some rest there, catch their breath. Okay, and right by the side of that Horegallu, there was an earthen pot in which cool water was kept for the tired travelers to refresh themselves. This is what we have read in the first part of the story. Now we are proceeding to the second part of the story. Now you can watch the second part of the story here. You could also read it on the screen. Once you read it, I'll be coming back with a few questions.
The Horegallu in our village holds special memories for me as it is inextricably linked with my grandfather. He was a retired school teacher and would spend hours every day sitting under the banyan tree and talking to those resting there. When I would get tired of playing, I would sit next to him and observe the people he was speaking to and listen to their conversations. Most of them were villagers taking a break from their work in the fields nearby. They had to walk long distances each day, carrying heavy burdens on their heads. Tired out by the heat, they would drink the cool water, wash their faces with it, and chat with grandfather. Their conversation would be about their daily lives and worries. Master ji, this summer has been so hot. I've never seen such dry weather. Or, Master ji, it is getting difficult for me to carry these large loads on my head. Thank God for this Horegallu. I wish my son would help, but he only wants to go to the city. They spoke about the difficulties they lived with. My grandfather would only listen to them, but just talking to him seemed to refresh them for the journey. After some time, they would pick up their burdens with some ease and go on their way. The Horegallu was an important feature in their lives, and as a child, I would often not understand why they blessed it so often for being there. After all, it was only a stone bench. It was my grandfather who told me, "Child, a Horegallu is essential in any journey. We all carry our burdens according to our situations and capacities. But every once in a while, we need to stop, put down that burden, and rest. Only then can we be refreshed enough to pick up the load once again." The Horegallu gives everyone that opportunity to do so. It helps people regain their strength.
Dear students, I'm sure you enjoyed reading that part of the story. As I've already told, Sudha Murthy writes in such simple language, the language of the ordinary people. And in a recent interview, I've heard her saying that she doesn't want her readers to go for dictionaries. And that may be the reason why she is one of the most read women authors in our country. Anyway, this part of the story, Horegallu, tells us about Sudha Murthy's grandfather. She says about her grandfather, how her grandfather was just like a Horegallu, listening to the problems of the villagers there, sitting under that banyan tree. So anyway, we will go through the questions here and we'll have a short discussion on these questions. Okay, take the first question. Why does the Horegallu hold special memories for Sudha Murthy? Why does that Horegallu hold special memories for her? Okay, you see, this Horegallu, she says, was inextricably linked with her grandfather. Inextricably means inseparably. This Horegallu was inextricably linked with her grandfather. Why do you think it was inextricably linked with her grandfather? It was so because all her childhood, she saw her grandfather sitting on that Horegallu for hours on end, chatting with the villagers. So the very sight of the Horegallu reminds her of her grandfather. So that Horegallu was inseparably linked with her grandfather. Okay, take the second question. What did little Sudha observe her grandfather doing under the banyan tree? As a little kid, Sudha Murthy sat with her grandfather under that banyan tree on that Horegallu. And what did she observe her grandfather doing sitting on the Horegallu? She observed her grandfather chatting with the people there, the villagers there, who were taking rest under that banyan tree after hours of hard work. So he always sat under that banyan tree on that Horegallu and chatted with the people, the villagers there. So he spent all his leisure time, all his free time he spent sitting under that banyan tree. And he provided them a lot of relief because he listened to their problems. He didn't say much. He didn't suggest any solutions. Rather, he simply listened to their problems and gave them a chance to unburden themselves. He gave them a chance to put down that mental burden. Okay, now take the third question. Who did grandfather chat with and what was their conversation about? Who did he chat with sitting under that banyan tree on that Horegallu? He chatted with the villagers there. Most of them were taking rest after a day's work, or some of them were taking rest as they were traveling long distances, carrying heavy load. They wanted some rest, putting down that heavy load. Okay, so he chatted with these people, mainly villagers, who were taking a break after hours of hard work in the field. And who did, the second part of the question also, who did grandfather chat with and what was their conversation about? What did they talk about to the grandfather? They always talked about their lives and their worries, their problems, their misfortunes, the miseries they were undergoing. Okay, some of them would say, Master Ji, the weather is very dry. I have never seen such a dry weather. Okay, if some other would say, Master Ji, I can't carry this load nowadays. I'm getting so tired. I want my son to help me, but he is not interested. He wants to go to the city. Such complaints they shared with the grandfather. Such grievances, their worries they shared with the grandfather. Next, what did grandfather tell her about the significance of a Horegallu? Okay, when Sudha Murthy, little Sudha, found all villagers blessing that Horegallu for being there, they showered praises on that Horegallu. They all said that, oh, thank God for this Horegallu. If it was not there, we would have been in trouble. So, hearing this, she wondered why all these people were blessing the Horegallu. After all, it was just a stone bench. Then she asked her grandfather why these people gave so much importance to that Horegallu. And what was the grandfather's reply? That's my question here. What did grandfather tell her about the significance of a Horegallu? And when she asked her why people gave so much importance to Horegallu, the grandfather told her, child, in our life, everybody needs a Horegallu. Okay, we all carry a lot of burden. And we carry our burden according to our situations and capacities. And once in a while, we need someone to put down that burden. We need someone to share that. So that we can feel refreshed, we can feel relieved and carry on with this journey. Okay, he may be meaning that life is a long journey, and during this long journey of life, we need to put down that mental burden. But little Sudha was too young to understand such these concepts. So he told her that in life we all need a Horegallu. Once in a while we have to put down the burden that we are carrying. So this is the response he gave Sudha Murthy. Okay, children, now we have come to the end of that part. Now you will be proceeding to the last part of the story. In this last part of the story, the author Sudha Murthy tells about a colleague she worked with in her Mumbai office. Another Horegallu she came across during her life. So you will now read that last part of the story about a lady named Ratna, and I'll be coming back with a few more questions like this, and we'll have a short discussion.
Later on in life, I got to see something that reminded me of that stone bench once again. I was working in Bombay, now Mumbai. One of my colleagues, Ratna, was a senior clerk, middle-aged and always smiling. She had done her graduation and been working in the company for nearly 25 years. She went about her repetitive, mundane work with an infectious cheerfulness. Every day, during the lunch hour, she would sit with some person in one of the rooms and they would have long chats. I often would wonder what they talked about. One day, I finally asked her, Ratna, what do you talk with each person for the whole lunch hour? Ratna smiled and said simply, they share their troubles with me. But how can you solve the troubles of so many people? Do you always have an answer for them? No, I only listen. And that is enough? That solves the problem? I was young and incredulous at such a simplistic outlook. But Ratna answered with the same patience and affection that she must have used with all my colleagues. I'm not a trained counselor or an intellectual. No one can solve your problem. You have to do it yourself. Then how do you help them by listening to them? God has given me 2 years to listen to others. I hear them out with sympathy and without any judgment. When a person in trouble or under a lot of strain finds an outlet for his worries, it relieves half his burden. I thought for some time and said, but don't you ever break the confidence and tell others the secrets you hear, even by mistake? Not even in my dreams. I consider that to be the worst kind of betrayal. I don't think there is a greater sin than betraying someone's confidence. They tell me their worries because they know I will never talk about it or gossip about it to other person. Only when they know their words are secure with me can they talk to me freely. This way, I relieve their burden for a short while till they are ready to pick themselves up and carry on with their journey. Her words uncannily echoed my grandfather's sitting on the stone bench under the banyan tree. Perhaps, in their own small ways, without access to great wealth, both these people were doing tremendous social work. No one thought of acknowledging their work or rewarding them for it, but they continued to do so, as these acts of kindness gave them joy. If ever now I happen to pass a Horegallu in a village, I remember them and wish there were many more of them in this world.
Dear children, with that, you have read the whole story, Horegallu by Sudha Murthy. And I'm sure you enjoyed reading it. In this part of the story, you have come across another character named Ratna, a middle-aged woman who worked with Sudha Murthy in her Mumbai office. Earlier we had read about Sudha Murthy's grandfather. And we read both these people were just like Horegallu. They were listening to the problems of others and giving them a chance to put down their burden. So let us discuss these questions here. The first question, who reminded the author of that stone bench once again? What was so special about her? Who reminded of her the stone bench? Later on in her life, in a Mumbai office, she came across another person named Ratna. And she reminded Sudha Murthy of that old stone bench once again. Because she also was a patient listener. And what type of a lady she was, what was so special about her? This lady had an infectious cheerfulness. You see what an infectious cheerfulness is. A cheerful countenance, a smiling face throughout, a smile that spreads many more smiles. That is what we call a cheerful smile. A smile that creates a lot of happiness around. So this lady had such a positive countenance, a very happy expression on her face throughout. And she went about doing her repetitive, mundane work with that cheerful expression always on her face. So that is what appealed to Sudha Murthy first. That middle-aged woman, she had been working in that company for 25 years, but she always had a cheerful expression on her face, and she's spread a lot of happiness around. Now come to the next question. What did Ratna do during her lunch hour? What did she do every day during her lunch hour? Every day during her lunch hour, she would sit with some person in a separate room, and they would have long chats. So this lady Ratna would have her lunch quite fast, and the rest of the time she would spend with some of her colleagues, sitting in a separate room, listening to her, maybe listening to her problems. This was how she spent her lunch hour. Next, third question. Did she have an answer for all their problems? So when Ratna saw this lady spending all her lunch hours sitting with somebody, listening to their problems, Ratna asked her whether she had an answer for all their problems. And what was the reply? What should you reply when when Sudhamurthy asked her if she had an answer for all their problems, what was Ratna's reply to her? She replied that she had no answer for their problems. She simply listened. And she said that God had given her 2 years to listen to the problems of others. And she said that she was not an expert counselor or an intellectual, but she had 2 patient ears, and she would patiently listen to the problems of others. And just by listening, she could give them some relief. She could solve half their problems. This was her attitude towards life. She thought it was her duty to listen to the problems of others. And God has gifted her with 2 ears, 2 patient ears. So she simply listened to the others and thereby gave them some relief from their emotional burden. Now come to the fourth question here. Did she ever leak out the secrets shared by others? Why? And then Sudhamurthy asked her if she would ever leak out those secrets even by mistake. And what was the reply? Did she ever leak out those secrets? And why? She never leaked out. She says she would never leak out those secrets because she felt it was the worst kind of betrayal. When somebody shares her secrets with you, it is because that person has so much faith in you. And to betray that faith, to betray that confidence is the greatest sin one could ever commit in life. This was her opinion. She felt it was the greatest sin one could ever commit in life. Betraying the confidence of others is the greatest sin that one could ever commit in life. So she would never betray the secrets shared with her by any of her colleagues. She would never leak out those secrets. She would never go about telling this to others or gossiping about it to others. Now come to the fourth question here. Now fifth one. Why do you think the author says that her grandfather and Ratna were doing social service? Tremendous social service. Why do you think they both were doing tremendous social service? So Sudhamurthy here says her grandfather and Ratna, in their own small ways, were doing tremendous social service. Without getting any access to wealth, they were not wealthy. Without getting any appreciation for their work, without getting any reward for their work, they kept on doing this because they derived a lot of joy out of what they were doing. They didn't expect any reward. They didn't expect any word of appreciation. They kept on doing it simply because they derived joy out of it. They were not aware that they were doing any kind of social service. But Sudhamurthy says these two characters were doing tremendous social service. So do you agree with that? Were they doing tremendous social service? Yes, of course, they were. Because by simply listening to the problems of others, you could give them a lot of relief from their emotional burden. And that way you could make those people happy. And if we all do that, if we all give our patient ears to others, listen to the problems of others, this earth would be a much better place to live on. So we can conclude that these two people were doing tremendous social service unknowingly, without knowing that they were doing anything so great. They simply listened, they gave patient ears, and that way they relieved the burden of others. So we have come to the end of the story. I am sure you all enjoyed reading the story. And what we see here in this story is the keen observation of the author Sudhamurthy. She had such keen observation, and her understanding of human nature, her understanding of the common man and his problems is what we read here. Okay, she has given a very vivid portrayal of two characters here. One, the grandfather, and another one, Ratna, a middle-aged woman who worked with Sudha Murthy in her Mumbai office. So she presents these two characters. She presents a beautiful portrayal of these two characters in this story. It shows her keen observation. Right from her childhood, she had such keen observation. She observed how her grandfather interacted with the poor villagers there. And later on, in Mumbai, while she was working there in telco office, she observed how Ratna interacted with her colleagues. So it shows a keen observation, her deep understanding of the people around her, their problems. So these are the things that we could understand from this. So goodbye, children. Have a nice day.